A Place Called Home by Laurie Wick. Chapter 20. Within the next hour, the four of them were sitting in church together. As Silas parked the horses and wagon, Christine had a chance to see Suzanne and tell her she needed to speak with Mark. Suzanne hugged Christine and promised to pass the word along. Having Mark and Suzanne to talk with was a great help. But these thoughts were far from Christine's mind as she sat in church beside Grandma M. As usual, she listened intently to Pastor Nolan speak, wondering as before at the strange feeling of expectancy she always felt. Christine reached for the pew Bible when Pastor Nolan told them today's text was in Luke 19. Her eyebrows rose in surprise, for she hadn't remembered that Luke was a Bible name. In Luke 19, Pastor Nolan told about Zacchaeus, a tax collector who cheated people. This made him very rich, but not very well liked. He was also short. On this particular day in Scripture, Jesus was coming to the town where Zacchaeus lived. Zacchaeus wanted to meet him, but the crowd and Zacchaeus' short height made this impossible. So the little man ran further down the road where Jesus would be walking. The Bible said that Zacchaeus climbed into a tree and waited for Jesus to pass. When Jesus was below the tree, he looked up and saw Zacchaeus. "Come down quickly," Jesus bade the man. "Today I'm going to eat at your house." Christine's mind wandered a bit as she wondered how Jesus knew that Zacchaeus was in the tree. She continued to wonder about this even as the pastor spoke on Zacchaeus giving back 4 times the amount of money he had overcharged people and giving half of his goods to the poor. The final verse was Luke 19:10. "For the Son of Man has come to seek and to save that which was lost." As everyone reached for their hymn books and stood for the closing song, Christine kept the pew Bible in her hand. She read the passage over again as everyone sang, thinking as she read that she had missed the part where Zacchaeus called down to Jesus or made himself known in some other way. The service ended and everyone moved toward the door. Everyone except Christine and Luke. Christine was still reading, and Luke, who had sat on the inside of the pew against the wall, couldn't exit without climbing over her. He stood patiently, waiting for her to finish. When Christine read the passage through for the second time, she turned abruptly to Luke. "How did Jesus know Zacchaeus was in the tree?" Luke, who was half expecting something like this, answered quietly, "Because God knows everything." He could see this made no sense whatever to Christine, because her brow was knit in confusion. He continued, "And Jesus is God's Son. Jesus is God." Luke watched her face, unsure of what was so confusing. Christine opened her Bible again and said, "But where does it say that?" Luke finally understood. "It doesn't say that in the passage we were in today. Here, let me show you where it does say that." Luke opened his own Bible and began to thumb through it. As he did so, Christine realized that the church had emptied. How embarrassing! She had stood there reading, even though the service was over, and Luke couldn't even get out of the pew until she moved. "Oh, no, Luke, it's all right. I best get to the wagon." Luke looked up to see Christine's face flushed in a way that was becoming familiar to him. Her movements as she headed toward the aisle were stiff, and she was looking anywhere but at him. "Christine?" His deep voice stopped her just as she reached the aisle. Luke waited until she faced him before speaking. "After lunch today, if you'd like, I'll write down some verses and you can look them up for yourself." She nearly sagged with relief. With a nod and a small smile, she headed for the door. Luke replaced the pew Bible that Christine had dropped in her hurry to escape. He followed, his pace more sedate as he exited, belying the way his mind raced for verses she would understand, and more importantly, would whet her appetite for more.